How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Global Gambit. We have had a bit of a time away from regulars, but we're back with one of our favorites, I think, one of our most frequenters, which is Larry Johnson, ex-CIA analyst. And Larry, I mean, it's been probably a couple of weeks now, considering that we often talk on a weekly basis, I think. And from my understanding, Trump has been considering nukes. He has been managing his mental health, or maybe not. Lots going on, and the MOU has officially expired. So, are we back at it?
Where do you want to start? Things are a mess. So,
tell me about it.
Yeah, probably the best way to describe it right now is we're watching the slow implosion of the American empire. It is besieged militarily, economically, diplomatically. You can't really point to one area to say, oh man, there's a rousing success. The military side is in special turmoil. We've seen, the press has been focused on the plight of the USS Abraham Lincoln, with reported attempted suicide of at least six sailors. It was probably much higher than that, but then poor living conditions on board the Abraham Lincoln. But it turns out it's not confined to just that aircraft carrier. It's pervasive. It's throughout the fleet. But there are problems that I've been personally informed by three different mothers of whose sons are sailors or Marines. One was on the Tripoli, one was on the Boxer, one was on the submarine. And the women are all telling the same damn story, that their sons are coming off extended floats, losing weight, complaining about terrible food, terrible living conditions, inadequate toilets, inadequate showers, lack of toiletries, just, common things that should have been taken care of. And instead of confronting the problems head on, the Trump administration, with Trump commander-in-chief, followed by his idiot Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, claimed that it's fake news. They accused the parents of lying. Whenever you get, like I said, these women have reached out to me personally because they've read the blog or saw an article, and they don't know each other. I can tell they're in different parts of the United States, but they all got the same story. So we're getting the same story off of three different ships. That's not aberration. That's not the exception. That appears to be the rule. And then it actually, as I did some more digging, it became apparent why that's a problem. The United States, somebody at the Pentagon a few years back thought it was a great idea to get rid of what they call fast supply combat ships. So without those ships, they got rid of half the fleet. There was only 4, but out of that 4, they only got 2 left. Well, the 2 are supposed to service all the damn ships in the U.S. Navy around the world. How does that work? And then they're supposed to draw off of the stores that were put in warehouses that were in Bahrain and United Arab Emirates, and those got blown up. So those aren't available. And so the United States has had to withdraw its supply function to Diego Garcia, but they can't get, their access to fresh milk, fresh fruits and vegetables, etc. Very, very problematic. So you've got that going on. You've got the Secretary of the Army sending a letter out last November commanding all of his officers and non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, to check it. They were ordered on every day. They've got to check in with every one of their soldiers to make sure they're not trying to kill themselves. That was the essence of the memo. Then in Cyber Command, which is based at Fort Meade in Maryland, they had 5 suicides apparently in June or May of this year. So there's a morale issue throughout the U.S. military, not just confined to the Navy. There are problems with the Navy, and then those problems translate over into, the Navy's supposed to do a blockade of Iran. Hell, they can't feed themselves and deliver tampons, for God's sake. You're muted. Still muted.
Can you hear Larry?
Now I hear you.
Not sure what's going on there. So is that really the case? I've not heard any of this.
Yeah, I'm not making this up. I've published it at Sonar 21 extensively.
So the US, despite its extensive military presence elsewhere, has logistical issues on the air carrier strike groups and various other facilities. Because I've heard on the carrier strike groups for sure.
Well, they've got logistic supplies with problems with weapons. 78% of the weapons that are produced for the Department of Defense that are, let's call them advanced weaponry, require at least 5 rare earth minerals that come only and are held exclusively by China, which means the United States can't reproduce them. As long as China is withholding those, and when China is withholding those, things like gallium and tungsten, not exporting it, not letting the United States get their hands on it. So here's the United States now short of PAC-3 missiles, short of THAAD missiles, short of Tomahawks, short of JASSMs, short of prisms. We go down the list. And they don't have the ability to rebuild or resupply.
No, I think.
And let me add in there. Then Trump's pissing on to South Korea. So 2 years ago, the United States was frantic going to South Korea. Oh, please, 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 give us some of those 155 millimeter shells. We need them for Ukraine. And so the South Koreans gave up some of what they thought they needed for their own defense to the United States. Now Trump is, bitching about South Korea, claiming, oh, they didn't come to help us in the Strait of Hormuz. With what? The mighty South Korean Navy, for God's sake.
It's preposterous, the whole point about South Korea. I think the guy just gets bored of one issue and he just wants to attack anything that he hasn't targeted in the past day or so. It's usually either Iran, Ukraine, Europe or something, but South Korea's avoided it up until now, as have the Japanese. But certainly, what do you think of the implications of that? Trump's just burning bridges everywhere, right? It's just insanity.
Yeah, no, he's. I said I don't think he's right in the head. When he threatens to bomb Oman. So here's Oman, who played the role of mediator between the United States and Iran, and now Trump's threatening to bomb Oman. And how are the Omanis supposed to react to this? Just say nothing? Oh, well, that's just Trump. He's sort of crazy. So they're doing it to Oman. They're doing it to South Korea.
Yeah, I've been to Oman. I've been there a couple of times. It's a really beautiful country. The Omani people are so reasonable and level-headed compared to so many others, I think, around some places. And they've been nothing but arduous mediators throughout all of this. Through the years, they've been there trying to support the dialogue between the Iranians and the Americans and just try to help facilitate some kind of peace. And I think without the hidden agenda of the Qataris. So for Trump just to sort of put them in the spotlight, and he always says, I think a lot of this, Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the fly, he literally just said it in the midst of a press conference, right? I don't think there was any notification that he was feeling so strongly beforehand.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was a press conference, but it was, the press was around and he, popped off.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like he says it in the heat of the moment. He's like he works himself up in that moment, and then he just says it on the spot. Like, oh yeah, no, they're going great. Oh, the talks are done. Oh, the Iranians. Oh, we're gonna. Oh no, money. Or we'll bomb the shit out of them. Sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's good. How do you look at the broader situation though? Because we've had so many different fronts happening at different levels of intensity right now. Like, what do you think of the Iranians' position? The MOU ended last night, and it looks to me like they've got a pretty good upper hand right now. That they've got the Americans right where they want them.
Yeah. Well, the Americans violated the MOU and then basically rejected it, and then declared the ceasefire over. So Iran has continued to retain control of the Strait of Hormuz, even though Trump insists that the United States has full control of it. It's just simply not true. The United States doesn't even have partial control of it. And then again, the issues I was highlighting about logistic shortages go to the very heart of the ability of the United States Navy to conduct an effective blockade of Iran. Hell, they can't even properly feed their soldiers, and yet they're going to be, or their sailors, but they're going to be able to blockade Iran? Please. Iran, I think one of the reasons Trump singled out Oman, it sounds like he received intelligence that Oman is going to sign an agreement with Iran governing the Strait of Hormuz that will include tolls. And any ship wanting to transit is going to have to pay a fee, but they won't pay a fee in dollars. They're going to pay a fee in Chinese renminbi. So it'll, again, shutting the United States economically out of the Persian Gulf. That is, I think, Iran's ultimate goal here. And they've been pretty effective at it in the process.
They certainly have. I'm seeing an update here as well that the US Abraham Lincoln has completed its 54th refueling operation. 54th. So in your years of experience working in the fields that you have, what does that mean on the ground? What does that mean from an intel perspective? Like how bad is that?
So the one of the longest, I guess, the record for the longest time at sea with stops, shore liberty, going to shore, going liberty, was the Gerald Ford. It was like 310 days. However, the Abraham Lincoln now has the record for the most consecutive days at sea without a port visit. They're now about 212, I believe. So it is, the number keeps going. They're going to be, they'll probably top out at around, I'd say maybe 250 before they get to see a port. And because another aircraft carrier, I believe it was the Eisenhower, or it was en route to replace the Lincoln. The problem is the United States, even though on paper it has 11 U.S. aircraft carriers, the majority of them they're in for repairs or they don't have enough crew. So again, more problems with the U.S. Navy. But the actions, let's put it in context. In World War II, the USS Essex held the record for the most days at sea without a port call. And that record was 79 days. So what we're talking about now is almost 3 times that length of time by these sailors and Marines that are on board.
3 times. Wow. God, that's insane. So yeah. What does that do to morale then? That must be like, even if you were to try to enter some kind of military operation, another blockade, that's not going to be physically possible based on the conditions that you're in psychologically, let alone physically, and with the equipment and everything else. That's
yeah, when you get 21, 22-year-olds that want to walk up on deck and jump off and kill themselves, that sort of tells you how morale is. You know, what's even worse, I don't know if it applies to the aircraft carrier, but it happened on the Tripoli, according to this one mother, that before they shipped out, they removed the chaplains. The chaplains who are supposed to be on board the ship as well. Again, somebody for the crew to talk to if they got problems. They pulled the chaplains. Oh, we don't need you. So just, you know, one further sign of the dysfunction that is not just the Navy, the U.S. military in general, and how can they help but being screwed up when they got someone like Hegseth at the head of it?
Well, aren't we being a bit harsh here, Larry? I mean, this is still the United States military. It has the capacity to be incredibly potent when it needs to be, surely.
No, it doesn't. You know, what are you basing that on?
It's just a provocative question to challenge you a little bit.
Yeah, but show me one example where the United States has been potent.
Gulf War, Iraq War, invasion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How long that Iraq war? Oh, wait, we're still in Iraq. We're just starting to withdraw.
Well, the invasion was very effective. It took us under 3 weeks to manage that. You're talking about the subsequent
putting troops on the ground after you've bought off the opposing army. That's no accomplishment, because remember what happened. We failed to quell the insurgency, which started, you know, and went on for years. We also failed in Afghanistan. We failed in the Red Sea against the Houthis. You know, the United States is more impotent than potent, I would argue.
Which countries do you think, if this war to be conducted by another third party, hypothetically, who do you think would do a better job of getting their military objectives achieved? Or you don't think anyone could against the Iranians?
Well, no other country would have been this stupid as to do this. You know,
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to take it. You've got to insert a ground force. Well, that you're going to lose tens of thousands of troops if you do that. And in this era of drones and ballistic missiles, both short range, intermediate range, where are you going to assemble your invading force? And then once you assemble them, then they've got to get in to cross the mountains. I mean, when you get a topographical map and look at Western Iran, it's like one big wide wall. It's mountains. There's a reason that throughout history, attempts to invade Iran usually didn't succeed too well, because you get into those mountains, you get they eat you alive. So, in terms of, let's rank militaries between as military power in terms of money spent. Probably the most powerful military in the world right now, hands down, is Russia. Close second, China. I don't know where, the U.S. would be way down the ranks when you figure it's spending now they need $1.5 trillion. The combined budget of Russia and China together is 1/4 of what the United States spends. So in just terms of bang for your buck, and we see that that catastrophe in a variety of ways. The United States has lost 45 MQ-9 Reaper drones over Iran. Each one of those cost $60 million a drone. They also lost an MQ-4C Triton. That goes. You could get that for the low price of $250 million. So the United States builds incredibly expensive, difficult to replace military equipment, and then wants to pretend that it's the most powerful military in the world. It's a joke, a perverse joke, but a joke.
I agree with you on the last point. I think that the United States spends obscene amounts of money where it's not necessarily the most cost-effective and operationally effective anymore. The Ukrainians and Russians are demonstrating that, well, the Iranians themselves have demonstrated that, haven't they? With the Shahed drones. But then, what to make of these statements that Trump said, was it yesterday or the day before, about his consultations with military staff, personnel, whatever, is nuclear. He's literally weighing up nuclear options. This is insanity.
Yeah, it is. He's, it's a sign of desperation. It also, if these reports are true, and I tend to believe they are, that if Trump really believed that he was winning, instead of just spinning a lie for the crowd, if he really believed that he had won, that he had defeated Iran, he wouldn't be wasting his breath or time talking about having to use a nuke, because he's already won, so he said. So the fact that in this closed meeting with senior advisors at Camp David over the weekend, he once again raises the issue of potentially using a nuclear weapon on Iran is a sign of desperation on his part. That's how to read it. Because, if you're winning, you don't need to go nuclear.
That comes in tandem, I think, with what's also been quite interesting, that he's changed tack on negotiations generally. He's posted on social media that, well, let's take a step back even further, Larry, right? He said that talks were happening and they were happening behind closed doors, and then Iran comes out and says, no, they're not. And now Trump's changed positions again and is now saying that they're not in conversation with Tehran. The deadlock is, quote, not due to a lack of diplomatic channels, but a fundamental clashes objectives, right? So Trump is just changing his narrative as and when, but all the while he's at the golf course and not actually sort of aware of what's happening on the ground. So he seems to be shifting back towards economic, constrainment, suffocation, which doesn't work. It doesn't work either, does it? The Iranians need the sanctions all this time. So what's the point?
Yeah.
Can you make some sense to this?
Well, no, I think you start with the assumption, or the false assumption, that Trump has some sort of strategic vision in mind. He doesn't have a strategic vision. I don't think he has a strategic brain cell in his head. He's very transactional, and he always thinks that he can spin it, he can tell the story, his narrative will rule the day. And he's increasingly finding out, he keeps coming up with a narrative that is not sustained or substantiated. So, he keeps declaring that the Strait of Hormuz is open. And so you follow the logic. Well, if it's open, then why are you continuing to mount a war footing against Iran if it's open? What's the purpose? And then they can't figure out if the focus is on opening the Strait of Hormuz or eliminating any risk of Iran having nuclear weapons, except we're told that he had already obliterated the nuclear weapons. So if you've obliterated it, why are you worried about it coming back?
Yeah, sorry, you cut out for me there a second.
Yeah.
I think what's nuts is that the Iranians start coming out of this the more responsible party. They're the ones that are talking about collective security, collective deterrence, regional stability, in a way that a lot of countries, whether or not you support America, but they wouldn't have exactly been associated with the Iranians being a bedrock of stability. So now you've got the Gulf states looking towards Iran as perhaps the country that they should just deal with, even if they haven't felt that, rightly or wrongly again. Right?
Yeah.
Iran is the one evoking security and responsible architecture, right? An architectural framing around those minds. It's I never thought I'd see the Saudis and the Iranians getting on better than the US and the Saudis are, but that seems to be the case now, right?
Well, the Saudis, they can't figure out. They're like, they remind me of a teenage boy trying to figure out if he wants to be transgender. They're confused. They can't. One day they want to dress up like a girl, the next day they want to dress up like a boy. Because on the one hand it looks like they want to have a decent relationship with Iran. On the other hand, they start attacking the Houthis, and the Houthis are just busting them up right and left. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. I've used the analogy that the Saudis live in a glass house, and they've decided to get into a rock throwing contest with their neighbors, the Houthis, who live in a rock quarry and have a brick house. Who do you think comes out on the high end of that? Certainly not the Saudis. So, they pick a fight with the Houthis that they can't win. They engage in a joint military pact with Pakistan and Turkey. And the centerpiece of that is an Article 5 type stipulation. Attack on one's an attack on all. Well, the Saudis have been attacked by the Houthis, and what did the Turks and the Pakistanis do? Nothing. Not our problem.
On that point, though, we've had this pretty big shift in the balance of power in the Middle East. We've had this new, defense pact signed, the Mecca Agreement. Is that largely just complete bollocks in your mind? Or
yeah, I call it the Me Too Agreement, Middle East Treaty Organization, METO, Me Too. The number one, you've got the issue of what I call interoperability. Turkey is supplied largely with U.S. military equipment or equipment that's compatible with NATO equipment. Mm-hmm. Saudis, same thing. They've spent a lot of money buying U.S. gadgets. Pakistan, Chinese. So you got to figure out first how you integrate those two. Second, you got to figure out how are the Chinese with the U.S. Those are the two. Then you got to figure out how you actually conduct a military exercise with the three. That, in my experience, usually requires a minimum of 12 months of planning, more likely 18 months. So unless they started 6 months ago, they're more than a year. I don't think you'll see anything in terms of a joint military exercise until November of 2027, a year and 3 months from now, minimum. So, and what are they, who are they going to attack? Certainly it's not Yemen or the Houthis, because, Saudis have had ample opportunity to enact that Article 5. They already had an existing bilateral agreement with Pakistan. And I don't see Pakistan wanting to get in the business of killing Houthis either. And we just saw again today, just within the last couple hours, the Houthis took out another Saudi oil tanker at Bab el-Mandab.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, on the Houthis, I mean, they are definitely not, no one's challenging them or anything. The United States is clearly not going to do anything at this point. But I'm also, and maybe I'm missing something here, Larry, but it doesn't seem like the Houthis have done as much as one might expect of them. It seems a little bit, underwhelming what they've done, or am I missing something, as I say?
Underwhelming what the Houthis have done or what the Saudis have done?
Yeah, you would have thought, I don't know. I guess when we first started about a month ago, this idea of the Bab el-Mandeb being put under pressure, constrained, the implications on global maritime chains and all that sort of stuff, we assumed that the Bab el-Mandeb would be much more at threat from the Houthis. But they've shot a few times at the Saudis, which is a problem, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, are they holding back?
Oh
Is
yeah,
it
no,
they're doing?
actually, they've got control of Bab el Mandab. That's why you're not seeing any Saudi. The Saudi ships that attempt to go through are being fired upon and sunk. So, and then you just had last week the capture of Mocha, or Mocha, as I guess they pronounce it in Yemen. But you know, you're familiar with the story of the port of Mocha in Yemen.
Yeah.
You know, the origin of Cafe Mocha. That's where it came
Okay.
from. That's where it came from.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting. Can't say I've heard that, but yeah, that was just my query was sort of, but if this, okay, so the Saudis aren't getting ships through then if we go with that, but it's
Right.
not completely closed. It is still open, right? I haven't heard of, because if it was completely closed, then markets would be completely in chaos and things are relatively.
Well, I mean, again, the market for oil should be in chaos because the oil's cut off. There's no oil going out through the Bab el Mandab. It is only going, if it's going out, it's going up through the Suez Canal. And the Houthis already have at least attacked twice, maybe 3 times, the Jizan petrochemical oil refinery, which is reportedly the most modern one in the world, anywhere. So they've caused considerable damage to that. So the Houthis right now, the best option for the Saudis is to reach a deal, cut a deal with the Houthis, peace deal, get it settled, stop that fight, and then get the focus back on Israel.
So I'm looking at the Bab el Mandeb vessels crossing. This is from marine traffic. So it's gone down a bit, but it does seem relatively vessels crossed by direction of crossing as of August 16th, 50 and exited the Red Sea versus 30 that entered. So it looks relatively stable.
Well, they haven't. Again, they haven't shut it down for everybody. They've only shut it down for the Saudis.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was just clarifying there.
Yeah. Only for the Saudis. They haven't declared, no, nobody's getting through. But they said, it actually the Saudis and the Israelis. If you're going to Saudi Arabia or Israel, forget about it. Otherwise, if you're passing through to Italy, be our guest. Go.
So why? I guess that's where the initial fear was coming from, that if you shut down the Bab el Mandeb completely, that would send absolute turmoil for the markets, for everything, right?
Well, but it should already, because regardless of whether Bab el Mandab is open or closed, that's not the origin point for 25% of the world's supply of oil. That's the Persian Gulf.
Right.
That's not the origin point for sulfur and urea. 30 to 35% of the global supply. The urea and sulfur, Persian Gulf. 40% of the world's supply of helium, Persian Gulf. 25% of the world's supply of liquid natural gas, Persian Gulf. So, I mean, the markets are like, they're pretending that they're not short of that stuff. And they absolutely are short of it.
Yeah, I'm just saying here, the picture worsened with 2 new attacks and several fatalities over the past few days, past a week. So this is already out of date. I think it's one of those things though, like as someone who monitors it on a daily basis, then Larry, clearly, how difficult is it to get an accurate picture of what's actually happening on the ground? Because I think that's part of
it's not that easy. I mean, you got to dig through a variety of sources and look both in on social media, X, Telegram, and try to pull up the embassy website for both for the relevant countries, and the regional media. Yeah, no, it's not. Look, there is a tremendous amount of disinformation out there and misinformation, but and I've got some friends who are in the energy industry as consultants and working still actively in the Persian Gulf. And they think some really dire things are about ready to happen.
So oil prices have climbed to their highest since July. Any sense of this resolution has just gone the way of the dodo at this point.
Right.
It's now just shifting to economic pressure again, even though that's what's not worked for the past 12 years. But let's just park that for a second. The other thing which I think is interesting is the Parliament Speaker, what is it, Galibaf?
Yeah.
He's come out again with some of his comments. And what I always find interesting is that when he makes a comment, stuff does shift a little bit. He seems to have quite a lot of sway in Iranian circles because he's more on the hardline sense. You know, he's a tough nut compared to Pezeshkian. What do you think happens next then? Are we just going to see that? Is it we'll just reconvene in a week's time or whenever, and it's just like, so same old shit, different week?
Well, no, I think it's a combination of things. I am not yet able to judge how effective the blockade of the United States is. If you listen to Trump, all of it's massive, but everything Trump says, I discount. If the prices, so let's look at the price of oil. So if oil really is widely available, then okay, you're not going to have economic pressure coming to bear on the U.S. market. But what do you hear Trump saying? He's talking about and J.D. Vance has said recently, they're concerned about the price of oil. And stock market today is saying, hey, price of oil and gas, that's going up. The price of diesel, the key one to focus in on, diesel and aviation fuel, because there's a global shortage of that. That was the oil that was coming out of the Persian Gulf. It's no longer coming out of the Persian Gulf, and hasn't been now for, even though the suspended shipments in, say, 28th of February, 1st of March, the reality was there were already tankers on the high seas that they made it until about the first week of April. Then they all floated. So I always track the start of this shortage goes back to the first week of April. So now we got May, June, July, August. We're 4 months into a shortage, and that's beginning to have its effect. The price of diesel in Italy is up substantially. So you're going to see prices of diesel, aviation fuel, they're going to continue to skyrocket. And that's going to provoke an economic crisis, I would argue.
Yeah, well, that's without even going into the winter, right? This is been in summer. When this war started, we were coming into warmer months, and the energy prices, the implications on cost of living, on energy price levels for people in Europe or Asia especially were not perhaps even that felt. I mean, it was bad for the petrol, but now you've got to compound heating your homes, especially in Northern Europe or parts of Asia, and on top of gas prices for your car. Like I think Europe and Asia are going to be, especially Southeast Asia, are going to be squeezed big time with the winter, right? I don't know if you have any speculation on that, but
well, you've got what you're seeing right now, what they call the crack spread. And we're not talking about, a bad concrete job in your front yard where the cracks are spreading. But the crack spread is the difference between what you pay for the price of crude oil and then the prices of the refined products. So you buy a barrel of Saudi oil, and let's say you're paying right now $100 for that barrel of oil. But then it produces diesel and aviation fuel out of what they call the middle distillate, the middle part of that oil. Well, if the price of those is up at 150, 160, per barrel, then that difference, that's the spread between what you pay for the whole barrel and then what you pay for the barrel equivalent when it's actually processed into a final product. That's off the charts, and it's getting worse. Again, it's not getting better. So that's why I think the fate of Iran is ultimately actually going to be decided because of economic factors, more so than military factors.
Oh, for sure. It's not really much like any war. I think it's going to happen off the battlefield, isn't it? It's not going to happen because of what happens. There isn't a battlefield right now. It's a bunch of people sending a bunch of messages nastily or back channeling. Oh, wait, no, they're not back channeling, and sort of bobbing about in the water, realistically. What do you think this does for the Israeli calculus, though? Because the closer we get to September, October, the closer we get to this election, Lebanon still means like a major flashpoint and trigger something worse.
No, everything that's happening in Israel, rhetorically, policy-wise, in terms of pronouncements, it's all you got to wait for the election because it's all calculated to play to voters. Doesn't mean it's what's actually going to be done, but the odds are it does reflect. I don't think between even opponents, opposition to Bibi Netanyahu, you're not going to see them calling for a peace agreement with Hamas. They're just going to be calling for, even in some cases, more extreme actions against Hamas, if such thing is possible.
Yeah, but there's meant to be this moderate bloke who's more realistic to beat them, even though I think it's just by one vote. Or isn't it 1 percentage point in the polls they're winning? So everyone's like, oh, Netanyahu's on his way out, even though it's slightly.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, what else does this do for the grand strategy? Like, if Iran, I'll put it this way, what time horizon do you think the Iranians are thinking on about all of this? Like months, weeks? Is there
in hopes of getting a settlement?
Yeah, getting some kind of capitulation.
I don't think they think. I think they're thinking more on in terms of years, a year or two. What they're looking at is that I think they believe that the United States cannot stay in this kind of engagement for more than a year, and maybe much less than that, because the combination of the morale of sailors on board the ships, shortage of weapons, rising economic costs, rising fuel costs, a whole combination of factors are going to limit the ability of the United States to sustain a military operation. And then the midterm election in November, so that's less than 3 months away now. If the Republicans get wiped out, the whole reason for being, the raison d'etre for this war will disappear.
Well, I don't think it will, though. I don't think that there is a feasible end in sight for something like this because of Trump's ego. I do not understand.
Yeah, true. But at the same time, there's no practical military solution for it either. That's the problem.
There's no practical solution, period. Economic, political, militarily.
Well, no, there's definitely practical diplomatic solutions and economic and military. The United States may have to accept, Iran is going to collect fees at the entry to the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if they've figured out whether they're going to only accept entry fee or if they're going to charge you going both ways. I suspect it'll be just a one-way fee. You come in, and that's good for a round trip in and out. But they establish that control over that. They get their economic relationships back in line in full working order with Russia, China, and other countries. And in exchange for that, the United States gets the guarantee that Trump said he wanted, that Iran's not ever going to build a nuke.
But that's assuming that the Americans, the U.S. administration behaves in a rational way, which is
Well,
not.
sure. Yeah, and indulge me one moment of fantasy anyway.
But a lot of people would say that the whole thing's a fantasy. No.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and they wouldn't necessarily be mistaken.
oh God. So what does this do for America's legacy then? What does it do for their capacity? Because some people would say that the Americans are going to close down bases. I find it difficult to believe that the Americans are going to do that. They're not going to agree to the Iranians' demands like that.
Well, let me ask it this way. What did Nero's reign do for Rome's legacy?
I'm not sure that's a comparison I would make, but not a positive one.
Well, why you think it's less destructive?
No, I think that it doesn't account for technological advancements, the growth and integration of the international system. Rome was very.
I mean, the United States is on its way out. Its role as the global leader very much in question now. People aren't lining up to buy U.S. Treasuries. They've been selling them, and Japan's on the Japan once again after an intervention about 2 weeks ago is now on the cusp of crashing again, and Beston's going to have to ride to the rescue again. Meanwhile, other countries around the world they're selling off their treasuries. In part, they don't want to be beholden at all to the United States in a place where the United States can hold them hostage. The U.S. tells you to do something, and they go, "No, we don't want to do it."
Yeah, look, I mean, we said this the last time we spoke, I think, which is that the US is certainly going downwards, but so far nothing is pretty clear as replacing it either. The Chinese don't seem interested nor ready to do anything of that nature. The Russians don't seem ready to do that or capable. Europe's not going to do it, can't do it. So Japan definitely can't do it. So there's not many nations that so the US is going to be declined in terms of its military influence in the Middle East, but can we say that it's adequately, irrelevant as an economic power as well? I don't think so.
Again, what is the United States manufacturing?
Manufacturing is one element of a very broad-based economy.
Well, but it's not a broad-based economy. It's a very concentrated economy. It's a financialized economy. Financialized in service. It doesn't, the manufacturing sector of the United States economy has been shrinking steadily, not increasing, and in contrast to China's, and actually in contrast to Russia's as well. And in fact, case in point, you saw the U.S. government commission General Dynamics in 2023 to build a new munitions factory, factory designed specifically to build 155 millimeter artillery shells, because by God, we needed to get those to Iran. $523 billion later, the Department of War / Pentagon has closed that plant because it produced a grand total of zero, I'll repeat, zero artillery shells after spending almost more than $500 million. That's the problem.
I agree with you on the unsustainability of it. I think the United States has there's an imbalance there, but I think the way that Trump is trying to go about reindustrializing the economy isn't necessarily that efficient. And also, as I say, China has the capacity to do that, but it also lacks its own areas as well. So I think it's sort of, and I think the United States' biggest challenge is the debt situation. The debt is becoming unsustainable, and it's eating away into every facet of the American economy, and confidence in the economy is one of the biggest elements. But I guess, Larry, last question simply for you, quick take, is what to watch?
keep your eye on the markets. I think the efforts that have used derivatives and oil, petroleum reserves that have tried to tamp down what's actually happening in the market, that's all coming to an end. So the problems now, they're going to escalate and escalate pretty dramatically and pretty rapidly.
Escalate pretty rapidly and dramatically. So we've got a third wave of war on the way.
Yep, economic war, but war nonetheless.
Oh, not the kinetic one. Interesting. Well, there you have it, everyone. Keep your wallets closed and your confidence low.
All right, my friend. Hey, good to be with you, Peter.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Larry.
All right, bye-bye.